Warrior 2, subtitled Transforming Lust into Love. Again, this program, Spiritual Warriorship, we discuss books, spiritual warrior books by His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami. And as I've said in the past, I repeat, he has published 6 spiritual warrior books, and they can be purchased at Krishna.com store. His idea behind the series of spiritual warrior books is really to help us to tune in to the concept of a spiritual warrior and to use it in a positive way. His presentation of the spiritual warriorship is really to help us become grounded in understanding who we are as spiritual beings. This is a very important point. It's interesting. I've been reading his book for years. And you read it, put it down. But reading it now in preparation of sharing it with you and getting his ideas and concepts, that's the full purpose of these spiritual warriorship books. So we can really become grounded in understanding who we are as spiritual beings. These presentations are also to help us cope with life in trying times, and to also help us use spiritual weapons to battle the tide of depression, anxiety, and feelings of hopelessness that sometimes sweeps our society. And what are those weapons? They're not the regular bang bang. No, the weapons of a spiritual warrior are love, humility, compassion, faith, and self-knowledge. If you were with us from the beginning of these programs and we went through the 12 qualities of a spiritual warrior, have been meditating on them and endeavoring to practice them, that sounds familiar. And the other concept to help us develop an internal positive dialogue for making the mind our friend. Because we also dealt with the mastery of the mind during those qualities, and we know the mind can be our worst enemy or our best friend. So all of this battle, our battleground is really the realm of human consciousness. And it's about changing consciousness that we can put these qualities and concepts into practice. So this evening we're going to continue in Spiritual Warrior 2, Transforming Lust into Love. But I want to share a word from the author himself that will give a short review and lead into the subject, what is lust? In fact, Bhakti Tirtha Swami sort of did a review of his own book, his books, up until, I think, Spiritual Warrior 5. So let's hear what he's telling us so we can get our consciousness ready to receive. He says, we all inherently want to love and be loved. Yet, we often find ourselves consumed by emotions diametrically opposed to love. We allow our materialistic consumer society to drag us deeper and deeper into a selfish mentality that condones competition, exploitation, or any other necessary activity that will get us what we want. Unfortunately, these seductive substitutes for love ultimately bring us pain rather than fulfillment, and will only intensify the massive problems we face today, such as famine and disease, terrorism, war, murder, suicide, and so on. These problems reflect our failure to fulfill our deepest longings for love. And any solution will require more than just a sophisticated technological effort. Spiritual Warrior 2, Transforming Lust into Love, attempts to address the most essential need of the individual by showing a clear distinction between lust and love. What is love? We read that, we went through that chapter. I don't know if you remember, and it won't give you a test. See if you remember any of the points. But this is his review of it. What is love? Unfortunately, countless people in the world today have never felt truly loved and do not even know how it looks or how it feels. Genuine love is selfless. It does not revolve around the desire for personal gain, but around the quality of the exchange between the individuals, the quality of the exchange. Instead of trying to receive, unconditional love is an experience of trying to give more joyfully than the beloved. Despite common perceptions, love is not a feeling that flows according to circumstances. Not like a faucet you turn on and off. Rather, genuine love remains constant in spite of adversity. Ultimately, love is a verb that finds its highest expression through unmotivated service. It only becomes real through our behavior. The deeper the love, the more we will express it by selfless service to the object of our love. Now, what is lust? He says, lust is the insatiable desire for personal sense enjoyment and the self-centered attempt to fulfill our own impulses at any cost. Nevertheless, despite all our attempts, we can never satisfy lust by any amount of sense indulgence. Although we know deep down that it can never fulfill us, we end up bound by an addictive and vicious cycle. The more we give in to lust, the more it demands. And those demands increase, just like a drug. If we do not give and receive love in a natural way, that is in alignment with our spiritual birthright, our love turns into lust and forces us to act in ways that we could not normally accept. Now, that was a lot of talk, but great. So we're going to go more deeply into that. But so far, if you've been with me or if you're coming in, just want to also review what we've covered here. So far, we have discussed in a chapter called What is Love? We talked about what love is not. Then we spoke about what love is and the source of love. That make you want to run out and get the book, right? Or if not, if you have talked about it, to talk more about it. Now, after hearing about that he offered us then something to enhance those qualities and concepts. So we entered into the school of love. Do you remember that? First sentence, life is a school of love. I found after doing that particular class discussion, the next morning, for a few mornings when I'd get up, it would ring through my mind, life is a school of love. And it's sort of an opening feeling to see, how can I give this day and what else will happen? It's a nice feeling. He tells us in the school of love that our soul is made for love. And we're all souls within this material body as a soul. So we're all made for love. He told us if we're not happy, we have forgotten our identity and purpose. And again, who are we really? The eternal question. And if we've been studying any spirituality or spiritual books, religion, we know that we're more than this body. We're a soul. And our purpose, again, all religions that are teaching is to love God. Love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, your whole mind. So if we're really in a miserable state, we have to examine and see, have we forgotten our identity and purpose? He told us in the school of love that our natural position is to give and receive love. And that any relationship we have is an opportunity to share love. Every moment, I like that section we were reading, to remember every moment of our life is an opportunity to give and share love. And again, because we studied in the what is love, the source of love, and our essential asset is full dependence on the Lord. Always remember Him and never forget Him, because He is the source of love. So I hope that through those discussions that we could endeavor or did endeavor or have endeavored to put these concepts into practice, because that's what hearing is about. You hear, you endeavor, you want to experience that, then you have to practice. Practice makes perfect, it says. Because as spiritual warriors on the battlefield of consciousness, we find that we are really waging war against ignorance and lust that is now pervading the human society. So, are you ready, warriors? Let's see how we can work to clear out this lust and get us to our higher level of consciousness. Chapter 3. What is lust? The ancient Bhagavad Gita takes the form of a long conversation between the Lord and the warrior Arjuna. And I hope those of you who may have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, if you're not reading it regularly, think about that. Start reading it. Really is spoken for us, to us, through Krishna talking to Arjuna. And those of you who don't have or may not be familiar, again, you can go to Krishna.com and you can read online and get a sense of this ancient knowledge. And you'll see whatever religion or practice you're in, the similarities, except that this, I feel, goes deeper for understanding of self and who God is. He continues, as Arjuna inquires about the spiritual truths of existence, the Lord offers important insights into the nature of lust. Now, Arjuna, a great disciple of the Lord, is rebelling against his responsibility to fight a major battle because many of the enemies are his family members, mentors, and friends. And again, this Bhagavad Gita gives us an idea to understand some of these conflicts and emotions we'll go through or are going through or have experienced. So it's happening, but the Lord himself helps us to see why we're having them and then how to work through them. Because even at the last minute, Arjuna was poised for battle, but he refused to fight. He was paralyzed by grief and anguish. So what does he do? He asked the Lord, who was playing the role of his chariot driver, to explain what he should do. And that's Bhagavad Gita verse 336. Arjuna inquires, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Arjuna wants to know what causes human beings to act in a harmful way despite their good intentions. Most people wonder what sometimes causes us to act against our better judgment. Haven't we all said to ourselves at some point in time, why did I do that? Why did I hurt that person? Why did I fly off the handle? We want to be ethical and moral. And we want to live an exemplary life. No longer taking drugs, drinking, insulting our spouse, being a chauvinist or abusing others. But despite the fact that we promise ourselves never to engage in such behavior again, we still persist in the same undesirable patterns. Arjuna wants to know what provokes such contrariness. In the next verse of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord gives the answer, explaining to Arjuna that lust only is the cause of our sinful behavior. Now, originally, we came into contact with lust just by being born into this world, a place where our eternal love for God turns into lust simply by the encounter with material energy. That is to say, our inherent natural love for God becomes lust, just as milk turns into curd when it comes in contact with lemon juice. Lust is actually an egocentric misdirection of the love that is our birthright. Let me repeat that. Lust is actually an egocentric misdirection of the love that is our birthright, a love inherent in all creation. because we are part and parcel of a loving God in our natural state, we share in that love. Here in this material world, though, we are not in our natural state, and the self-centered energy of lust has caused us to forget our birthright. And I know we've heard in the Bible it said that this world is not our home. And as we've been reading and studying, Pratitya Swami continuously reminds us that the kingdom of God is where we are cleaning up our act down here in order to go. The next section is called Suffering in the Material World. Whoa, let's get to that. Huh? Who's not suffering? And we'll find out why. He says, suffering is an inherent aspect of being born into the material world. In the kingdom of God, the problems of old age, disease, and death do not exist. How can there be imbalance and disorder in the kingdom of God? Our miseries are consequences of our physical embodiment, not our spiritual nature. Our miseries are consequences of our physical embodiment, not our spiritual nature. And this is, he keeps bringing us back to getting, as it said, grounded and knowing that we are spiritual beings. Imagine that someone said to you, I want to send you to an interesting place. It's one where people constantly kill each other. Races fight against one another. Tribes struggle against each other. And men and women compete against one another. It's a place that becomes so hot you can have a sunstroke and die. It's so cold that you can freeze to death. You might be harassed by insects, rats, snakes, spiders, and one species is constantly devouring another just to eat. You wouldn't want to go there, would you? No. He says this is the nature of our present environment. It is very hellish. Sure you'll agree with that. An intelligent person who has a choice would not want to come to such a terrible place. Sometimes we can see a bird in our own backyard swoop down and grab an insect for dinner. Just imagine how it would feel to be that insect. He tells a story of he was sitting on the porch one afternoon in Nigeria, and he as he watched, he saw some ants, and then some beetles quickly ate the ants, and immediately a grasshopper ate the beetle. Then all of a sudden a bird flew down and ate the grasshopper. This little drama occurred in a matter of minutes, and it gave me an even greater realization of how one species constantly abuses another in a universal struggle for survival. He states next, the material universe is not our home. And it's accepting that, realizing that makes us hopefully make an effort for getting to our real home. He says, this earthly realm, so filled with suffering, cannot bring us happiness. That is why the Bible tells us to not love the world or the things of this world. All bona fide prophets, including Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and many other great acharyas, teachers, deliver the same threefold message. Using different terminologies, they teach us to love God with all our hearts, to love our neighbors as ourselves, and to seek the kingdom of God, which is our true home. Jesus said, "Our Father who art in heaven." By saying "Our Father," Jesus has made it clear that each of us have a connection in the spiritual world just as he does. We all have a common origin and home. But as long as we're covered by lust, we forget the truth and live like criminals sentenced in a long prison term, reincarnating over and over again as we search for peace and happiness in all the wrong places. Since in our original state we are all pure servants of God, whatever else we have become is temporary, part of the contamination that we have imposed upon ourselves, lifetime after lifetime. Once we identify with the material world, we are subject to its problems and errors. What is the expression in the Bible? In the world, but not of the world. But when we're in the world and we identify with it, then we are subject to its problems and errors. Because if we're not of the world, then we know we're of a higher consciousness, a higher dimension, and we make all the efforts and endeavors. And that's why teachers come. Remember in the School of Love, it speaks of teachers coming to help us, to guide us, and we're to follow their instructions. We cannot have sufficient love for God if we become too attached to the things of this world, because we cannot serve God and Mammon simultaneously. If our minds are filled with lustful thoughts of material pleasures, then there is little room for spirituality to enter our consciousness. And spirituality is what we're here for, to get to know who we are and to share that. And that knowing that makes us be more loving individuals. That is why the saints have told us throughout millennium to simplify our lives with simple living and high thinking. We must always engage in purifying our consciousness, otherwise we will not have room for higher realizations. Now, this is an interesting section. The title says, "We are accountable." You know, it seems easy when things aren't going right to point the finger and blame somebody else. But it's from the beginning of these discussions, he's always told us we have to look within ourselves. So let's see what he's saying here about us being accountable. The choice of God or Mammon is always up to us. We do have choices, huh? Although we may blame external forces for our addictive, manipulative, or selfish activities, we cannot escape our own ultimate responsibility. Even in the extreme cases where people actually become possessed, hear voices, or fall into a trance as the body moves uncontrollably, these apparent victims of demonic energies are accountable for their situation. Although they may explain truthfully that their behavior was beyond their control, they forget that they did make choices that led to this condition in the first place. Negative forces are attracted wherever there's a receptive lower consciousness. And I know we've heard this, and I remember, as within, so without. And if you're not happy with your environment or what's going on, you really have to look at yourself. Where's your consciousness? What is your thinking? What is your mind attached to? What kind of association you're in? So that being accountable and responsible is quite realistic. He goes on, even in less dramatic situations, we make excuses, saying that, something came over me, that we are subjected to demonic influence, or that we fell under the spell of Maya, another name for illusion. But despite appearances, we are always responsible for our actions. Take some thought, but if you think about it, take your time, be realistic about it. Despite appearances, we are always responsible for our actions. Would we try to rationalize our behavior in a court of law by explaining, Judge, it wasn't my fault, the devil made me do it? Of course not. The judge never says, oh, well, that's all right, I'll just put the devil in jail instead of you. So again, the accountability and how we, develop this habit of trying to blame it on somebody else, even the devil. What causes one person to act immorally while another does not? Both individuals may face the same temptations, yet one succumbs while the other resists, or one gives in occasionally while the other yields on a regular basis. The difference can be found in each person's level of commitment to spiritual life, which increases the level of resistance to the negative influences. What is your commitment to spiritual life at this point in time? He says, if we open ourselves to the Lord, we are acting spiritually. When we elevate our consciousness, our love and spirituality act as a block to keep negativity away. So for a lot of negative stuff, I've heard people say, oh, there's negative energy interfering. I don't know what happened, negative energy. But what he's saying here, we have to elevate our consciousness and our love so that our love and spirituality within, this is all inert within it, in there, it can block the negativity and keep it away. Isn't that good news? Some people just think they're caught up and can't get out. But there is a way out. As he said, in this school of love, we're made for love. But we have to know the origin of the love, and we have to be accountable and work on our own consciousness so that we can help others. He says, but if we open the door to sin, then we become possessed by a sinful consciousness. Sin can never be considered greater than righteousness. If we say that the devil made us behave badly, we are implying that the devil is more powerful than God. This is never true, and only seems to be true at times because of the impure state of our consciousness. So we have work to do, don't we? Okay, I want to get to a section here. He talks about the gradual path of degradation. Boy, where did that word come from? My consciousness. Okay, let's see what time. All right. How did we become so impure? Good question. Have you been asking that question? The Lord explains in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 37. He says, "It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material modes of passion and later transform into wrath or anger, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world." Because lust causes us to lose our sanity, we often behave in ways beneath our original nature, and then our lust becomes compounded with anger. Okay. He says, let us see how this works. There's a section I want to get to before we close tonight. He says, if we do not give and receive love in a natural way that is in alignment with our spiritual birthright, our love turns into lust, which forces us to act in ways that we would not normally accept. Then, because we feel forced, we become depressed, demoralized, unfulfilled, and consequently angry. Deep down, we know that lust can never fulfill us, but we become addicted. It's a vicious cycle. The more we give in to lust, the more we grow accustomed to it, and then then the demands of lust increase. It's similar to taking a drug. At first, we may yield to temptation just to see what will happen. We may even have to force ourselves to tolerate such a damaging substance. But after we become habituated, we begin to enjoy it. Eventually, we find that we need more of the drug to get the same level of stimulation as before. Lust is like that. The more we succumb to it, the more it takes control, until finally we no longer engage in sinful actions for the pleasure, but just to avoid the pain. We do not realize that lust has seduced us into a dependency that will ultimately destroy our health and well-being. In the beginning, we may simply be struggling to cope with life or to create a sense of belonging. We take a drink or ingest a drug in order to numb ourselves to feel better or to gain acceptance in a group. But the power of lust is so great that eventually we lose control and our addiction takes over. Indeed, lust destroyed many people who thought they had it together, causing them to lose their business, their political positions, their family, their sanity, and even their lives. People naturally want to access a higher level of consciousness and intense experiences beyond the normal or the mundane. So it's a natural feeling, desire. In contemporary society, where genuine love, that word genuine love, we've been through it, and the two words I definite I remember is, what is it? Genuine. It's real, non-hypocritical, and just for real. You know when something is for real, and you know when something is not for real. Genuine love can be intoxicating, he says. A person in love is single-minded, determined, and sometimes a bit giddy. For example, immediately after talking to your beloved on the phone, we may find ourselves skipping and dancing. Remember the feeling. And if someone we care about does us a favor or pays us a compliment, our spirits are high. But when love is absent, we may seek intoxication by other means, such as alcohol, drugs, or sex. Now he has a section called triumphing. Is that the word? Triumphing over lust. Triumphing. You know what I mean? We must watch ourselves carefully, he says, if we are to escape the clutches of lust. To halt the downward progression of our consciousness, we must not allow our lust to degrade into anger and self-perpetuating illusion, from which it is extremely difficult to escape. People who have conquered lust can accomplish amazing feats because their self-control connects them with the energy of love. They become empowered spiritual warriors who are extremely difficult to defeat. An empowered spiritual warrior. We're on that path. On the other hand, those under the influence of lust are easily manipulated. For example, a boxer may deliberately try to make his opponent angry in order to cause him to lose control and lunge with no thought for the consequences. This is just what the fighter wants, to have his opponent open and undefeated, ready for defeat. To avoid, this one's good, material energy in the guise of the devil or Maya likes to make people lose control so they become easy prey. Consequently, we must monitor ourselves. Again, the responsibility is on us. Monitor ourselves, being careful not to allow lust to make us lose mastery over any situation. Like the boxer just mentioned, a warrior who loses control becomes a casualty. A soldier who gets angry on the battlefield may suddenly leap out of his foxhole and run towards the enemy shouting, "I'm going to kill all of them." Of course, he is the one who will soon be dead. To avoid falling into these traps and to live fully as human beings, we must learn to control our lusts by regulating the senses. Lust hides out in the senses, looking for a chance to take advantage of us. It can cause us to lose every ounce of equilibrium and stability we have, and can drive us to commit the most heinous actions, even murder or suicide. As we have seen, the more we give in to lust, the more difficult it is next time to resist, and the more enslaved and conditioned we become, to the point that we may spend the rest of our lives in its clutches. The senses function in an interesting way. They can be compared to horses pulling a chariot, each one straining in a different direction to make the chariot move. Any one horse pulling too strongly can cause disaster. The senses are so powerful that any unregulated or improperly controlled situation can cause an individual to commit sinful actions. What holds our senses, the horses, in check? It is the mind, governed by the intelligence when it is in contact with the soul. The intelligence, as just mentioned, is our faculty of discernment. Human beings function according to an ascending hierarchy in the following order: the senses, the mind, the intelligence, and finally the soul. Like a skillful enemy, lust hides out in the senses, the mind, and the intelligence, waiting for an opportunity to dominate us and cover our awareness of the soul. The mind serves as the intermediary between the intelligence and the senses, and accepts or rejects stimulation from the environment according to the quality, caliber, strength of our intelligence. In response to the environment, the senses, and remember we talked about they can be compared to horses. Now here are the senses, and put this on each horse. The eyes, nose, ears, mouth, and genitals. These senses send messages to the mind, demanding that the mind arranges for their gratification. Remember we're saying, if any one horse pulls too strongly, it can cause a disaster. And the senses are so powerful that any unregulated or improperly controlled situation can cause an individual to commit sinful actions. Now here are the senses, and they send a message to the mind, demanding that the mind arrange for their gratification. Now the mind is constantly engaged in accepting one demand and rejecting another. Accepting, rejecting, accepting, rejecting. A mind that is not sufficiently strong will give in to the senses repeatedly. A strong mind will diffuse to become a slave to the senses. And when I thought of this, and I wanted to give a great description, all these senses in the horses and the minds, what came to mind is you go to the mall. I think we've all been to the mall. And that's where the senses run wild. And that's where the mind has an opportunity to either accept or reject. As soon as you enter the mall, right, your eyes see something. Oh, I like that outfit. They have it outside. It gets your attention right away. Oh, I could use that. And the mind is saying, no, you don't really want that. But look beyond that. There's a better one over there. And as you're deciding to go look at that and the mind's accepting, all of a sudden your nose comes in, that horse. And you smell, oh, something's cooking. I think I'm hungry. Mind says, yeah, accept. Let's go get something to eat. What happened? You start down path to the restaurant to get something to eat, and the other horse says, oh, you hear, you pass the music shop. I don't go to malls often. Now, but you hear some music. Oh, that sounds like my favorite artist. I think I want to go check out that record. And the mind says, you don't want to go there. We're going to eat. No, I want to hear that. And there's a struggle. There's a fight. And then the mouth, you open your mouth, see somebody, hey, you forgot you were angry with that person. What are they doing here? And these senses are going back and forth in the mind. So what he's saying, though, this is why we have to master the mind. We've been through this, right, with the 12 qualities. The mind is not sufficiently strong, will give in to the senses repeatedly. A strong mind will refuse to become a slave. And that, we can tell that happens to us sometimes. You come out the mall and you say, what have I done? What did I get that for? Oh, and I get that big plate of food. Now I feel sick. You just follow, let your senses follow instead. He says here, we often have difficulty keeping the mind under control. Even when we manage to refrain from speaking inappropriately or stop ourselves from taking an unwise action. Sometimes we're able to stop, but it's difficult. He states everything in our lives is based on quality of mind. Who we are now, who we were before, who we are going to be, and to what degree we are bound or liberated. The interferes with self-realization. The mind interferes with self-realization or serves the soul. It can be our greatest enemy or our greatest friend. Nothing is more devastating than a mind out of control. And I'm sure we at some point said, what happened? Why, as we said earlier, why have I done that? Why did I do that? Because the mind knows all our secrets. An enemy who is this close to us can be very destructive. But a mind under control becomes our greatest friend for the same reason. It knows us intimately. A close friend is a source of great comfort and support. The mind's choice of direction is up to each of us. You're accountable and you're responsible. I have a note here. I want to go to Bhagavad Gita 6:34. I want to hear what Srila Prabhupada says. 6:34, the text. For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. This is Arjuna talking to Krishna. O Krishna, and to subdue it I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. And some of you maybe have been thinking, as I'm reading this, you got to conquer those senses, control the senses, the mind. It's really difficult. Prabhupada says in the purport here, the mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence. Although the mind is supposed to be subservient to the intelligence. For a man in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind. Artificially, one may establish a mental equilibrium toward both friend and enemy, but ultimately no worldly man can do so, for this is more difficult than controlling the raging wind. And this is an example we gave of the horses. And here's another example given and found in one of the scriptures. The individual is the passenger in the car of the material body, and intelligence is the driver. Mind is the driving instrument, and the senses are the horses. The self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and senses. So it is understood by great thinkers. Prabhupada states, intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's intelligence. As an acute infection may suppress the efficacy of medicine, such a strong mind is supposed to be controlled by the practice of yoga. What is yoga? To linking back to the source. But such practice is never practical for a worldly person like Arjuna, which means he can't just go off somewhere and meditate. But what can we say of modern man? The simile here is appropriate. One cannot capture the blowing wind, and it is even more difficult to capture the turbulent mind. The easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra of deliverance in all humility. The method prescribed, one must engage one's mind fully in Krishna, in God. Only then will there remain no engagements to agitate the mind. So as you endeavor to move out what is destructive, you must put in what is liberating. I just want to read one more thing, and then we can open for questions if there are any. What did I just do? 6:34. Okay. We talked about the intelligence and the mind. And here again in Bhagavad Gita, it states, the working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And the soul is even higher than the intelligence. The senses, as Prabhupada states in the purport, the senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness, God consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of God. Therefore, the hierarchy of bodily functions as described here ultimately ends in the Supreme Soul. I hope you get it. If you haven't got a Bhagavad Gita, please try to get and read. This really breaks it down nicely for us. I see I have one thing more marked here. Bodily action means the functions of the senses. And stopping the senses means stopping all bodily action. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act as it does during dreaming. But above the mind is the determination of the intelligence. And above the intelligence is the soul proper. If, therefore, the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme, naturally, all other subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind, and senses, will be automatically engaged. So we're going to just finish this section of Bhakti Tirtha Swami. He says, when the intelligence is connected with transcendental knowledge, it has sufficient power to harness the wild mind. In such circumstances, the mind will calm down and regulate the senses properly. But if the intelligence is weak, the mind will not listen. Instead, it will fall prey to the dictates of the senses. When we have gained sufficient mastery of the senses by developing a strong mind and intelligence, we can elevate our consciousness. On the other hand, if we lack mastery, we will find ourselves on a downward slope toward animal-like behavior. Animals are extremely concerned with territorial rights and attacking others to protect their sovereignty. Humans in a low state of consciousness act in the same way. We attain a significant point in our elevation when we can break out of the animalistic shackles. We do so by developing our intelligence and tempering it with humility. Humility is a powerful weapon because it opens us up to a greater love, concern, and compassion that we naturally become more interested in the welfare of others. All right, I'm going to end there tonight. I'm fascinated reading because I've read, and yet each word seems to jump out, each sentence seems to jump out. I hope that you will be able to take something from this, imbibe it, and put it in your life. And then some of these examples I think we've all had experiences with, and some maybe even wishing to change. And he's giving us step by step, so to speak, ways to do it. We just have to practice and desire it, because the Lord is in the heart, and He will help us. Are there any questions or comments?
Comments are that your class this evening was very nice, very beautiful, and many devotees or people participating say thank you. Son of My Soul made the comment that this has been a very powerful message to me, as always. Thank you, Mother Indrani, for your willingness to share with us. I have been challenged to soul search, painfully so, and deepen my quest ever onward.
Thank you all for your kind comments. Now, when you come back next time, tell me how you used what you heard. Because you must have heard something to make such a kind comment, and I thank you. It encourages me to continue to share the teachings of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami. So, are there any other? No. Okay, we're going to end here. We'll start next week with Spiritual Strength Conquers the Senses. That sound exciting? Okay, I look forward to meeting you again, and thank you. Have a wonderful week, and be a strong spiritual warrior.